Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and radio here on WSKB 89.5 and Westfield Community Programming Channel 15. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and I've had Broadway on my mind all summer since the pandemic ended, and Broadway show tunes and musicals kept me going during the pandemic. So when you think about Broadway, the only place to think about around here is the Bushnell in Hartford, which is the home to many Broadway shows over the years. For over 90 years, the Bushnell has been the premier performing arts center in Hartford and serving Western Massachusetts. And it's where people go to see opera, ballet, symphonic music, entertainment, and Broadway musicals and plays. And Alex Page Hatley from the Bushnells here this morning. First of all, welcome. It's our first time to chat, although colleagues of yours are regulars on Artsbeat over the years. And just as the pandemic was beginning, Paul Marte, who was one of your communications people, said, "We'll be back in a couple of weeks. This pandemic's not going to last for very long," but it completely changed our world, particularly in Broadway. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yes, we thought we'd be gone for 2 weeks, and that was not what happened.
Yeah, I mean, even now, as things are loosening up, Broadway theaters are just about to reopen, I guess, mid-September, and the tours are just starting back. I mean, I know you've shifted the schedule of things that are coming many times. How long is it going to take a particular Broadway show that's going to go on tour to get back on track?
So a lot of them are beginning that process or have already begun the process of, auditioning if they have to re-audition for parts and getting back into rehearsals. Wicked is back up. It was the first tour to open back up in Dallas. I think it depends on the show and how much it goes into it, but 6 to 8 weeks, I think, is probably what it takes for most tours to get back up and running.
Now, I know in the past, the Bushnell has always been either the second or third stop when a show goes out on tour. And I understand it was explained to me that they often start their national tours in Schenectady or in a theater in New York State because it's close to New York City and they can fix things within an hour or two away. And then they come to the Bushnell after that and they kind of zoom off from there. With the shows that are coming back to the Bushnell this fall and into the winter and spring, will they all have been on the road for a while, or will they just be coming back as they come to Hartford?
So it really depends on the show. A lot of them have not a lot. Some of them have already started on tour back in southern states where the theaters have been open a little earlier than they have up here in the Northeast. But for shows like, I'm trying to think, I don't think we are the first show back for any of the touring groups that we have coming in the fall. Escape to Margaritaville starting in Tulsa, but they're going to come here about 3 weeks after that.
So the show, the Bushnell is capable of bringing in the technically big shows like Wicked, as well as smaller productions. As you look at the lineup for the next year or so, what are some of the highlights? And we got to say that to people watching or listening, just go to the Bushnell's website for ticket information, because Alex and I don't want to spend the half hour saying, and the balcony price for this ticket is that, and the loge price is this, and all of that. But the complete schedule is up at the Bushnell's website, which is bushnell.org. And the great thing about the Bushnell, if you haven't been there, is it's easy to get to in downtown Hartford. Plenty of free parking around it. And if you get there early, there's a cafe and all that good stuff. So you're going to an easy to go to, easy to sit in theater. But what are some of the highlights for you coming up this upcoming season?
Oh, I mean, we have so many great shows coming. We had three shows that never got to finish their run in our 1920 season. So those will be layered in with what we're now calling our 21-22 season. But some of the really big shows that I'm excited about are Hadestown, which has been nominated for 10 Tony Awards and won. It's actually, I think, the only show to have hold a 2-year record for best musical, because we missed the Tonys last year. But we also have Hamilton coming for 3 weeks in June, July of 2022, which is so exciting to have them back after they were here a few years ago. We have the 25th final season of Love tour of Rent coming for a weekend on November 5th through 7th. I personally love Rent, and I'm super excited to have that show come back in. But yeah, we just have some really awesome shows. We have the revival of My Fair Lady coming in March, which is great, followed by Dear Evan Hansen, which is a huge show that I know a ton of people are excited to see. So we've got a great lineup coming up and so many good shows happening in the next year.
I remember when Hamilton first came to Hartford a couple of years ago, the lines were around the block for tickets, and people would have, they'd given their lives to get a chance to see Hamilton. And it was kids, high school kids, junior high school kids that you would never expect to be going to a Broadway show. And with the show coming back, it's more than a year from now. Is the excitement still there for that?
I think we are seeing the excitement still there for that. I think when it came out on Disney Plus, it reached a whole new audience that, had maybe heard the soundtrack, but hadn't actually got to see the stage play, and now are so excited about seeing it live. We've already had, people asking us, when are tickets for Hamilton going on sale, which I can say I don't know what yet. But yeah, I think the level of excitement is still there for Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm very surprised by Hamilton because I saw it, I knew a lot about it, but I never expected. When I was a kid, it was sort of the tail end where you'd see show tunes on the Billboard charts, or you'd hear or see scenes from Broadway on TV and hear it on the radio and things like that. And Hamilton sort of brought that all back because I knew middle school kids and high school kids that knew more about Hamilton than I did as an arts reporter and the music and all. So when I went to see it, I was fascinated that it was probably the youngest audience I had ever seen at the Bushnell for anything other than a children's theater production. And it was great. I don't know how it felt for you working in theater, but for me, it felt great because there was the next generation of theater goers sitting there and appreciating live theater in a way that we haven't seen for years.
Exactly. And, Hamilton was so revolutionary in so many ways. And, the diversity and the inclusion of rap and hip hop into the musical genre, it's just been such a groundbreaker. And I think it's really reached a new audience that I hope will continue to be excited about Broadway shows.
I'm actually interested in seeing My Fair Lady. My Fair Lady was the first show that my parents took me to see when I was a child on Broadway. And in retrospect, I was more excited about taking the train to New York. I had never been on a train before and all of that. And seeing the sets, there was a shift in scenery to the ball at the embassy and watching the sets fly in from the top of the theater. I was astounded at the technology of that. And then, of course, now when you see a show like Wicked or Hamilton, you go, wow, that was just real amateur back then. But I mean, My Fair Lady is a classic that you just don't get to see anymore. So I'm real excited about that opportunity because that's going to introduce a classic to audiences that have never seen it live.
Absolutely. And this revival that started at the Lincoln Center is it's so gorgeous. The costumes are gorgeous. The music is gorgeous. And so, having that show come in and having it be, one of the older shows, I think it'll be a great addition to our lineup.
How long have you been at the Bushnell?
I've been at the Bushnell almost 2 years now. I started in December of 2019. So I was only in the building for a few months actually before COVID shut everything down. And since then, I'm in the office today, but the majority of time I've been working from home and not enjoying the beautiful building that I was used to being in for those first few months.
What brought you to the Bushnell initially? Is your background in the arts or culture or entertainment?
So I have always been a fan of Broadway and theater, and I have done a little local community theater here and there. But mostly being able to market these amazing Broadway shows that I'm a huge fan of. It seems like sometimes my job is just what I would do for fun anyway, trying to convince people to come see these amazing shows. So it's really an amazing job. And the Bushnell is such a great place to work.
Yeah, and how did you get into theater? Is the Bushnell your first theater job, or had you done theater before?
It is my first theater job.
Is it everything? I mean, granted, you said you started right before the pandemic, but is it a dream come true?
It is. It absolutely is. I had done theater, throughout high school. I kind of moved away from it in college, but I've always been a fan. I've always gone to see Broadway shows, and to now get to say that, I'm going to go see this new Broadway show in New York City for my job. That's just kind of an amazing thing that I still pinch myself.
Yeah, I was going to say you have to pinch yourself every once in a while. People don't understand necessarily in terms of when a show comes to the Bushnell, and you as a marketing person and a public relations person have to get the word out about it. Does the show provide you, for example, with the commercials and the logos and all of that? Or do you have to do the creative work to sell a show when it comes to Hartford?
Sure. So yeah, these shows have beautiful assets. They provide us with the videos and images and radio spots that we just do a little bit of legwork to localize, whether that's, having a voiceover actor record a tag and adding that on, or just putting the Bushnell logo and the dates onto an image they provide us. But they do such a wonderful job, with the photography and the videography that really there's not that much to do for us. Now, that's a whole different story for smaller shows that come in that are not Broadway level, but they do provide many of the assets that we use the marketing of the shows.
And how long in advance do you know that a show is coming? I mean, you obviously know what you've announced to this date, but how far in advance does the Bushnell book a particular show?
So I know we hold dates sometimes years in advance. We'll be talking with a show, and I know our VP of programming, he pretty much has a good idea of what's coming about 2 years out. But until the contracts are signed, we can't really say when they're coming for sure. But about 2 years out, sometimes longer.
Yeah. So in the case of a show like Hamilton, you guys had to wait a long time to get it when it went out on tour, and then even longer to get it back a second time. Are your programming people already looking at the next time for Hamilton down the road, or the next time for Wicked or Aladdin or one of the big blockbusters, or are the opportunities to book them rather limited?
So I think I bet our VP of programming would say, of course, he's always looking to book new dates. But I think it's also, audience appetite for the show. We don't want to bring it back too soon if they've already seen it within the past couple of years. We want to wait a little bit so that excitement to see it again builds up. But I know for some of those big blockbuster shows, I think we would love to get them back as often as possible, as long as the audience appetite is there to see it again.
Yeah. And what happens if a show, your programmers have to anticipate what's going to be the next big thing opening on Broadway, but suppose they block the time. Let's say they're talking right now about this big revival of Funny Girl that's going to star Beanie Feldstein that was just announced. And so the Bushnell goes, wow, we've got to get Funny Girl, and you're going to book it for 4 years from now, and then you find out that Funny Girl just wasn't a hit. Is there enough product out there that you all can produce a season year after year without having trouble finding shows?
Yes, there is enough product out there where that usually is fine. So we have about 7 Broadway shows that are part of our Broadway subscription, and then sometimes we'll book about 2 or 3 weekend shows that are also Broadway but off subscription. So, if you're thinking 8 or 9 shows a year, I think that leaves plenty of shows that are still on tour to rotate in and out. But yes, I heard about that Funny Girl revival as well. I'm super excited about it.
So are we both running down to catch the first preview of that?
Let's go together on the train.
Yeah, let's do that. Alex, we have to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make programming like Artsbeat possible here. So while we're taking that break, find out what's going on at the Bushnell in the upcoming months, and for not only the Broadway series, but some of the other special events. For example, not on the Broadway series is Rent, coming back after 25 years. And the Hartford Symphony Orchestra is a resident performing arts group at the Bushnell in their smaller building theater. So you can find all about that at bushnell.org. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're talking with Alex Page Hatley from the Bushnell, and we'll all be back after these announcements.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Dental. Comprehensive dentistry at 14 convenient locations in Springfield, Chicopee, Longmeadow, West Springfield, Belchertown, East Longmeadow, Ludlow, Northampton, Greenfield, and Wilbraham, as well as 29 Broad Street in Westfield. Bay State Dental makes it a priority to help you achieve and maintain the healthy smile you deserve. On the web at baystatedental.com.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley, with convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut. Visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org. Join us the third Wednesday of every month with Selectman Joe Didi and his take on everything Southwick.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone, here on 89.5 FM WSKB and Westfield Community Programming Channel 15. I'm Mark Auerbach, your host. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're talking with Alex Page Hatley from the Bushnell in Hartford, where the big Broadway shows come. Alex, people may not be aware of the Bushnell. I mean, they go to the Bushnell, but they don't know what goes on behind it. How many people work at the Bushnell?
So the Bushnell, if you count stagehands and volunteers, we have probably over 200 workers. We have a group of 600 volunteers that are, ready to swap in and out of different shows. But the core staff is about 50 employees, and then, plus the stagehands and everybody.
And that's down a little bit from before pandemic times, right?
That is. We are bringing, everybody is back full time now, but yes, during the pandemic, there were a few, losses
and
of jobs.
Now, what's the timeline for going back to full steam? I mean, some people stayed throughout the pandemic but worked remotely, and then your performances or live events start in September before everything else, right?
Right. And we are, I would say right now we are full steam ahead. We are starting marketing those shows. Our first show back is a Middlesex Vocal Cords 9/11 tribute concert on September 11th. So that will be our first live performance back on the stages, which is super exciting. But we are full steam ahead going forward with all the other shows that are on our calendar right now.
And approximately, once everything is back up and running, approximately how many events will the Bushnell have over the course of a year?
So right now we have about 21, 22 events confirmed through next summer. But I I would gather that we'd be adding more to that in the spring and possibly into the summer of 2022.
Now, for those of us that haven't been to Hartford for a while or stayed home, there was a lot of free parking around the Bushnell, but I understand that there's some construction and things like that. Will the free parking continue to be there in the government lots?
Yes, so we still have the free parking lot that was there when we closed down. We also have use of a new parking garage on Buckingham Street. So it is a state lot that we're allowed to use for our events called Buckingham Garage, and it will provide plenty of free parking for our patrons.
Now, the Bushnell is primarily a presenting house where you book other events that are already produced and things like that. But does the Bushnell ever produce its own entertainment on any level?
So very rarely we will be a producing partner on different shows. The most recent one was a social justice play called Warriors Don't Cry. And it was about a young girl reflecting back on the end of segregation in Arkansas and how she could be a warrior advocate at her school. So that was one that the Bushnell was a producing partner on. And then this summer we did a whole new project by producing a music video at the Bushnell. We partnered with hip hop nutcracker choreographer Jen Weber. And we're super excited to be releasing that in the coming weeks. It's not out yet, but that was a first for the Bushnell to be involved in a project like that.
And the Hip Hop Nutcracker is not part of the Broadway season, but that's coming up also this year. And what are some of the other things that are coming that are not Broadway that people can go see during the course of the next couple of months?
Sure. So on October 1st, we have a Festival of Laughs, which is a comedy lineup featuring Samore and Lavelle Burton and Earthquake. Some big comedian names will be coming in. Then on October 8th, we're welcoming a Chilean pop star. Her name is Miriam Hernandez, and she will also be in the Mortensen. She's kind of a ballad singer. Her music is beautiful. She will be, like I said, on October 8th. And then we're welcoming David Sedaris back on October 19th. If you've ever seen David Sedaris, he's a great storyteller. His show is hilarious. So we're really excited about that. And then, like you said, our partner organizations, Hartford Symphony, they're opening up with Beethoven's 7th, October 1st through the 3rd. And then there's a few other HSO pops sprinkled in before the end of the year. And CT Forum is welcoming an evening with Yo-Yo Ma, and that is on, where'd it go? November 9th.
So that's kind of an eclectic mix. So how many, I guess you get to see all of these shows, right? So how many shows are you, of the shows upcoming are you going to see just once, and how many are you going to stand there every night and see for all 8 performance runs?
Well, I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but Escape to Margaritaville is our first Broadway show back, October 12th through the 17th. And, you know, it's just going to be a party atmosphere. You have Jimmy Buffett music, you know, it's kind of a rom-com show. And I think that could be one that I'd stay for more than one night because, you know, you're going to be singing along. There'll be a party happening, maybe some beach balls released in the theater, and that would be really fun.
Yeah, I know that it had a very brief run on Broadway, and it was scheduled to be at the Bushnell before the pandemic. Not before the pandemic, but it was on the roster before the pandemic. But people say it's quite the party show, and if you like Jimmy Buffett music, it's a kickback to Key West for 2 hours of music and entertainment.
Yes, absolutely. It's a very cute show. It did have a short run on Broadway. But it's funny. It's good to sing along with, you know, you'll be dancing. And if, you know, federal and state guidelines allow it, I think we'll be doing a sort of Margaritaville pre-party before the show.
Yeah, we have to mention the mandates and the guidelines and things like that. The Bushnell's a front runner in making sure that both the people on stage and backstage and the people in the audience are safe, what are some of the regulations that are in place right now for people returning to the Bushnell for performances?
Sure. So like you mentioned, our patron safety and the safety of our volunteer staff and artists on our stage are our first priority. So we will be requiring guests and patrons to be fully vaccinated when they come to the theater. And that means having gotten their second dose of a 2-dose vaccine or their first dose of a 1-dose vaccine within 2 weeks of the show date. And then being able to provide your vaccine card, whether it's a physical copy or a copy you have taken a picture of on your phone, along with an ID. And then masks will be required in the theater as well for the duration of the show. There will be designated concessions areas where folks can take their masks off and eat and drink. That is our policy through October 31st. At that point, we'll kind of evaluate what the science says and what the regulations and guidelines are, and maybe make some changes to that policy.
Well, Alex, I can't wait to see the curtain go up. It's been way too long since I've gotten to go to the Bushnell, so I'm looking forward to it. And I hope that you'll come back over the course of the season and chat with us some more about things that are upcoming, because the Bushnell is always on my radar, and I always hope that it's on everybody else's.
Me too. And I so look forward to having everyone back together in the theater.
Okay, so we're going to see you there opening night for Escape to Margaritaville. And in the meantime, folks, check out the Bushnell's upcoming schedule at bushnell.org. Alex Paige Hatley from the Bushnell, thanks for joining us on Artsbeat.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you soon, and let's plan our field trip to New York to see Funny Girl.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, take care. We're going to take another commercial break to acknowledge the underwriters that make programming like Artsbeat possible here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and we'll be right back. Don't go away.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
This is Ken Stomsky from Ken's Den on WCPC 15 and 89.5 FM, Tuesdays, 8 to 10.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today, and we have a treat for this half hour of Artsbeat. The cabaret singer and jazz singer Jane Scheckter has made a name for herself in New York and in the music capitals of the world. She spends part of her time in Europe performing in Paris, part of her time in New York, part of her time in other places. She's recorded a bunch of albums in jazz and standards. And lucky enough, she is a native of Springfield and actually lives in the area. And what's interesting is I knew Jane when we were both kids. Jane's mother was my 4th grade teacher. And so when I came back to Springfield after living away for years, and I would run into my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Scheckter, at the local Big Y, she would always tell me what Jane was up to. And Jane came back to town to do a performance at the Summer Pops at Stanley Park, with the Springfield Symphony Orchestra. It drew over 5,000 people. I was there working that night on behalf of Stanley Park, and Jane and I reconnected. And then our paths went in different directions until this last winter when I was preparing a 50th anniversary special of the musical Follies, which aired here on Artsbeat. And a colleague of mine was in the original cast. His name was Michael Masita. And I was following his Facebook page. And one day I saw a comment from Jane Scheckter. So I had to say, Jane, are you the Jane Scheckter I grew up knowing? And she said, yes. And it turns out that Jane, who is here with us this morning, moved back to Long Meadow a couple of years ago, and we live around the corner from each other and hadn't seen each other in something like 20-something years and reconnected this summer. So I'm so thrilled to have you back, or for the first time, actually, on Artsbeat. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
It's so good to see you again. And your career has really taken a great path throughout the concert halls and clubs and cabarets and on both sides of the Atlantic. How did you get into not only performing as a singer, but into the standards and the Broadway show tunes and jazz of the period, the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s?
Well, that's what I grew up with. I mean, that's what we listened to all the time. I remember I used to go to the Springfield Library, and you could rent. I mean, you could take out albums, and one of my favorite was "On the Town" by Leonard Bernstein with Comden and Green, and I used to play it all the time. So I've always loved Broadway musical, and that's the music my father knew and played when he was in a harmonica band in the 1930s. And so that's the music I always loved. I mean, I remember having sheet music with Doris Day or Rosemary Clooney on the piano. You know, I mean, these are the people I loved. I grew up with. For my 12th birthday, my father brought home an album of Lena Horne at the Waldorf Astoria. And I went from wanting to be a Broadway star or a movie star to singing in clubs. That seemed like the most exciting thing you could do.
And when did you get your first chance to sing professionally? And when did you know that you had the stuff to make it work?
Well, I don't know. It just seems I was always singing, and I mean, I took piano lessons, violin lessons, but I was always singing, and it didn't dawn on me whether I was good or whatever. I mean, I became president of the Glee Club when I was at McDuffie, and my mom taught me to read music when I was about 4. So I mean, I've always been reading music, and I was blessed, cursed with perfect pitch. So whatever I could read, I could also sing it instantly, like Doris Day in the movies. Remember, Frank Sinatra would show her some music and she'd see it once and then she'd sing it. Yeah, well, I can do that too. I don't sound like her, but I can do that too.
Well, I knew your dad was a harmonica player. Was your mother a musician?
No, but she played the piano. I mean, she took piano lessons when I was growing up, and she would play her Bach and her preludes and etudes. And so when we lived in Springfield on Belmont Avenue, we lived on the 2nd floor, and the piano was in the dining room, and there was just always somebody playing or doing something. But it's funny. When I was 14, my parents thought, well, since I'm so into trying to sing, they had me take singing lessons, and it was just the worst thing because this woman didn't know anything about the kind of music I loved, and she had me singing like semi-classic things, and oh my goodness, it's just not me at all. And I couldn't show off to my friends what I was learning because I was singing something like Caro Mio Ben. Caro Mio Ben. And when you're 14, you don't want to sing songs like that.
Yeah.
So that did not last long. And I didn't take singing lessons all the way until I was out of college.
But but
New
you
York.
took you had to have taken some kind of lessons to protect your voice.
No. No, seriously, I didn't. I must say that the last teacher I had, and unfortunately she died in 1991, but she taught me to sing correctly. And it's a lot of it is about breathing. I mean, I remember there was in the early days when I was singing like at the Improv, I think it was 1968, I would sing a ballad and an uptune, and then that was it. I had no throat left. And once I learned to sing correctly, I mean, I have sung 4 hours straight through and I could go another four. So once you learn how to really do it correctly, but I think people who just are naturally singing um, don't hurt themselves. I mean, unless you're a screaming rock and roller, there's no reason why you should hurt yourself.
And you primarily do your concertizing in smaller clubs and venues, right? As opposed to Stanley Park for
Right.
5,000 people.
Yeah. Although in October of 2019, just before the pandemic, I was in the cabaret convention, and the past few years it's been at Lincoln Center in Rose Hall, the jazz.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a sold out house, and out I went, and there were over 1,200 people there, and it was heaven because it was not, I mean, you could hear a pin drop. The sound was fabulous, and people know in that crowd that you don't talk, you don't make any noise. So it was spectacular. So that was 1,200 plus, and it was fabulous.
I know that you have the luxury of when you're doing a cabaret or your own concert to pick your own repertoire, unless somebody says, "Hey Jane, could you do an evening of Rodgers and Hammerstein, or could you do an evening of the Beatles?"
Yeah.
But when you pick your own repertoire, what are some of the songs and the composers that are your go-tos?
Well, I mean, I've done whole shows of Cole Porter. I've done whole shows of uh, Cy Coleman, and whole shows of Cy Coleman with Dorothy Fields. I've done whole Dorothy Fields show, and with and without Cy Coleman. So uh, then I go to their what they've written, and I pick my songs from there. But I've also for many years done a tribute to Bobby Short, and so I picked the song. He was by the way, he was my mentor. I heard him when I was 10, WBZA, Boston Springfield Radio, and I would be listening, to Frank Sinatra and everybody. And then one night I heard Bobby Short sing "Sand in My Shoes," and I went crazy. I said, he doesn't sound like anyone ever that I heard before, and I just bought all his records starting from age 10, 11, and so that very much altered my taste in songs. And also I was in love with Tony Perkins, but that's a whole other show. And he made 3 albums, and what he lacked in great voice, he had a nice enough voice. I mean, he was on Broadway, and he had also great taste in songs. And that, when you ask my songs, I learned to love the lesser known songs by the great composers. And that's kind of been my guiding line of what I pick.
How often do you introduce a new song or a new composer into your repertoire?
Well, sometimes friends that are composers, I will sing their songs and put that in the show. And put it on records too, on my CDs. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had said we had chatted. You said you before the pandemic started, you were beginning work on a new recording, but you've got a couple of recordings out there.
Yeah, I have 4. I did the first one in 1987 with Mike Renzi, Jay Lenhart, and the late Grady Tate, drummer. And that was the first one. And it was called "I've Got My Standards." Thanks, that my husband came up with that title. And then 4 or 5 years later, I did 93. So it was 5 years later. I did "Double Standards." And then many years went by, and then I did one called In Times Like These, because it was after 9/11, and I just did a song, a whole CD filled with songs of hope. And that was 2001. And then I did one in 2011 with a band. I had Bucky Pizzarelli and just amazing people playing with me. And so between 2011 and now, I figured it was time to do one more at least. And so I was in the process of pulling it together and having way too many songs and having to eliminate. And then I'd hear a song in a show or something. I go, oh God, I love that song. And so that got added to the list, and something else got taken off. And once I feel really comfortable about going into New York to work with my piano player. We'll do it.
Yeah. Are there some new composers or new songs that are on your radar that you've heard over the last few years, or new composers that you'd love to take a chance at doing some of their work?
Honest answer? No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's not really totally fair. I mean, there's a lot of newer, than Gershwin and Cole Porter. That I really love their songs, but they're not always right for what I sing. If you're in a show, then you are the character. Like if you're in a play, is what I mean, and then you're singing a song that you wouldn't normally sing. But as I explained to my students, that when you're in your own nightclub show, it's you up there. And so I sing songs that reflect sort of my philosophies. Like I stopped singing a number of years ago what I call poor, pitiful me songs. Great songs, but I just don't feel like, if someone's not my life is not worth living. I don't like that. So I sing, which doesn't mean I don't sing sad songs, but I sing songs that aren't poor, pitiful me songs. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Do you practice in between gigs to keep your voice in shape? I know some people are religious about it. Some don't.
No, I never sing in the shower. The only time I ever really sing if by myself is if I'm in the car and I have a jazz station and I'll sing along with something, but I really don't. But because of the pandemic, my singing class, we Zoom every Friday afternoon and we all sing one song. So that's kept me kind of doing something that I never used to do, which is practice.
Yeah. I know that you sing on both sides of the Atlantic and that you spend a lot of time in France. When you perform in Europe, are the audiences for your kind of music different abroad than they are here?
Well, I can't speak for other countries, but in France, I've never met, and I've met fabulous musicians. They know all the American great songbook. They know all the songs. I find it amazing, and they are fantastic. I mean, the piano player that I've worked with, we're down in the south of France, so he plays in Nice, he plays in Cannes, he plays all over, and he did a Nat King Cole tribute show. I mean, is that fabulous? I mean, they know the music, and nowadays, if they don't know the music, they've got all these programs that you can get online, and they just dial it in. There's a song, and you tell them the key, and so there's no such thing as not knowing the music. And the audiences know American music. I mean, we don't know the French songs, but they know all the American songs.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't know French popular music particularly, or French standards. Maybe some of the things of Jacques Brel or Edith Piaf, right, exactly, and things like that, but not to the extent that the Europeans know, right, our music.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and they love the American songs. All the singers that I've met in France, the French ones, they all sing from the American songbook. And if they don't sing American songs, then they sing like Jobim. They do Brazilian bossa nova kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, you've always sung in the standards, of musical theater and jazz. Did you, before you went off on your own to be a singer, did you ever do work like musicals or plays or anything like that at the beginning of your career?
Um, well, actually, oh God, what year was it? I have to think about it. It was 1961. They did a citywide audition for Aunt Diary of Anne Frank, and I was one of the first ones to read, and they said, "Could you wait?" I waited until they saw everybody, and they said it was you right away. So that was fun, and I was in plays at McDuffie, and I loved it. And although I auditioned on Broadway stages for other shows during through the 60s and early 70s, but I did off Broadway stuff, but nothing on Broadway. But my real love is singing in the clubs. I love that immediate sense of connecting with people, and the chance to pick my own songs.
And you got to start out in New York when clubs, every hotel had a club. There were jazz clubs, all kinds of music clubs throughout the city. And that club scene really changed. Well, you were part of its golden age, but it sort of changed. And you don't have the club scene now that we had 20 years ago.
Right. I mean, first of all, it's very expensive. Well, I mean, you have to sort of take the whole pandemic out of that scenario. But I mean, it's very expensive to run a club, and I mean, most singers don't get paid. That are in the cabaret. You get the door, you get the music charge. And even then, the club takes a little bite out of that. It's not exactly a lucrative career. But there were so many clubs in the 70s. Oh, it was amazing. It was just amazing. But there's some really, really wonderful ones still in the city. And of course, where I've done most of my singing in the last few years was at Birdland, which is, that's paradise. That's just the best.
And there were also the clubs were places where a lot of people got their starts. I mean, people like Barbara Streisand got their start in some of the smaller clubs, or Barry Manilow or Bette Midler. So you were kind of coming of age at the same time, like Barry Manilow.
Well, yeah, I met Barry in September of 1969, and he had me meet him at a rehearsal studio because I guess he figured if he didn't like me, that was it. But after I started singing, he said, "Okay, well, after today, we'll meet at my apartment." And what's crazy is that I knew Barry. And I knew Bette totally separately because she would come from doing Fiddler on the Roof and come over in her jeans and then get dressed in the men's room because it was cleaner than the ladies' room. And she would put on a gown and do her hair and come out. And she and I and another lady, Shelley Ackerman, we would sing between the comics. So David Brenner would come on and Robert Klein would go on. And then Bette would come on and do a couple songs. And that would go on till about 2 a.m. And Bette and I used to take cabs home because I was on West 72nd and she was on West 76th. And they didn't meet until a couple of years later. So that's kind of crazy.
So you all started at the same time. When I was contemplating going into theater, my mother said to me, make sure you get educated to get a day job. Your mother also told me the same thing. You also went to school so that you could have a day job if you weren't singing, and had quite the career designing clothes.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to either be a famous fashion designer or a famous actress performer. And so what's so crazy? I went to Pratt Institute. So I have 4 years, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And I remember saying to my mother, because the Yale Yale had a master's class in drama that just had opened up the year I graduated. So I remember speaking to my parents that I wanted to go to graduate school in drama. Right. And I'd been in all the shows at Pratt and concerts and a lot of jazz and a lot of theater. And I was in all of that. And my parents said, well, we just paid for you to go to college. Why don't you give it and be a fashion designer? Why don't you give it a try? I got a job immediately. I mean, so that took care of that. No Yale. And I started working on 7th Avenue. And I got a job. Basically, I was picking up pins off the floor and handing them to this lady, Betty Carroll. But I learned a lot about draping. I can still cut a pattern by eye. It's really crazy. But I got a job within a few months as a designer. I was the only designer at a company called Town Jane. So I guess that was meant to be. But being a designer, I could go into work at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I would sing late at night at the Improv and take time off at lunch for rehearsals with Barry Manilow at his apartment. I mean, it was right. But I really, really wanted to sing. So I auditioned for Fiddler on the Roof, and they did 13 weeks in outside Boston at Framingham Dinner Theater, and I got my equity card. And then soon after that, I quit full time to just be an unemployed singer.
Well, yeah, but you were one of those people who got to follow their dream, which is kind of cool. Are there any singers up and coming today that you think have it, or people that you like, or any on your fan base?
There's some fabulous jazz singers. First of all, Emmett Cohn is the most amazing pianist, and he works with a young lady named Veronica Swift. I think she's just 25. She is spectacularly fine singer. And then for young guys, there's a guy named Nicholas King who, I mean, he was on Broadway when he was 8 years old. He's Liza Minnelli's his godmother, for God's sakes, but he is great. I think if times were different and careers could be made, he's like another Mel Torme. He is fabulous guy, Nicholas King. And he works with Mike Renzi, who I got to do my first 2 records with and work with for 12 years.
How can people find out about your, you have a website, and where can people get your CDs?
Through CD Baby, or if they contact me, I guess I could send things to people directly. I find that when people buy stuff through some of the bigger chain things, I don't see a penny, not a penny. So at least if they buy it through CD Baby, I do get some of that.
Some of your royalties.
Thank you.
And you have a website as well that people can go to. And do you have any like YouTube channels or social media?
I have. Well, here's the crazy thing. I have 17 videos on YouTube under Jane Scheckter with a K. Scheckter with a K. We're Russian. And but they also have my last 2 CDs on something called Top Tracks. So you go to YouTube, Jane Scheckter, and Top Tracks, and the songs will come up of everything that's on the last 2 CDs, which is kind of, I didn't put it there. I don't know.
You don't know how it got there, huh?
This, but there they are.
So, how did you and your husband span the pandemic? I mean, you were kind of sequestered like everybody else. Where did you get your culture? What were some of the things you discovered during the pandemic?
Netflix. Watched a lot of TV, watched a lot of shows that we binged. There was some amazing things on television, just amazing. And also, the pandemic, we're both, my husband's in the Writers Guild. That's why I met him in LA, and he was writing for Mork and Mindy, and he had done something for MASH. And anyway, so he's still in the Writers Guild. So because of that, and I'm in Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA, from doing jingles, we get all the screeners. So we didn't have to go to the movies. We just get everything at home and watch it at home.
Have you been watching the summer series Schmigadoon, the takeoff on the Broadway
No,
musicals?
no, I think it's on Hulu. That's probably one of the
It's
few.
it's on Apple Plus right now,
That
and
we
for
don't
me,
get
it's been just terrifically funny,
it.
and some of the songs, which are all takeoffs of Rodgers and Hammerstein, The Music Man, Brigadoon, and all of that,
Yeah.
seem to be showing up all over YouTube.
Yeah, I that's one of the few that I don't have. But yeah, I mean, we've been watching. Can I say the word? You know what? Creek. Uh, and I mean, there's just been some brilliant television that's been going on, and I find this is really strange. But I've gotten books, but I find it so hard to read. I tend to fall asleep. I'm reading and I sleep. So I've got books piled up to read.
I certainly appreciate it. Jane, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us, and I know that you're headed off to France soon, so bon voyage.
Thank you. Did I tell you my website or will that?
It's Sing Jane Sing.
Yeah, Sing Jane Sing. www.singjanesing.com.
So you all should go check out some of Jane's stuff. And we're actually going to end today's Artsbeat program with one of Jane's interpretations of a Broadway classic and Hollywood classic, Jane Scheckter. Thanks for joining us. I hope I get to see you before you run off to Europe.
Got a few weeks to go.
Okay, so we will touch base soon, and that wraps up another edition of Artsbeat here on Westville Community Programming Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB. We've been chatting with the cabaret and jazz singer Jane Scheckter. If you've missed a part of today's program or you want to go back and catch it again, you can find it on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and we leave you this morning with Jane Scheckter singing the classic Always.
I'll be loving you always with a love that's true. Always, when the things you've planned need a helping hand, I will understand. Always, always. Days may not be fair, always. That's when I'll be there, always. Not for just an hour, not for just a day, not for just a year, but always. Not for just an hour, not for just a day, not for just a year.